I say in my own commentary, Dr. Beau Branson is assistant professor of philosophy at Brescia University in Kentucky. I think I'm saying that right, Brescia. And his research focuses on the philosophy of the early church fathers, thus what I said, Orthodox Greek. Dr. Branson frequently interacts with Dr. Tuggy's research on social Trinitarianism. Social Trinitarianism, if you recall, is a type of Trinitarianism that articulates God's nature in terms of three beings that are differentiated in personhood, but they work together to support one another, so much so that God's love is expressed across the personhood of the Trinity. God is love, and yet God cannot love in eternity unless there is another person for him to love. So God the Father eternally loves the Son. God the Son eternally loves the Father. And the love, of course, is shared across the personhood with the Holy Spirit. Thus, in the social Trinitarian model, we need three persons, or at least more than one identity, to have this shared social interaction. Dr. Tuggy also talks about relative identity Trinitarianism, or RI, and Dr. Branson interacts with relative Trinitarianism as well. Relative identity Trinitarianism doesn't focus so much on the persons of God, rather it focuses on the identity of the individual, the aspect that God has this relative identity that when we're focusing on the Father, that identity is God, and the identity is the Father when we're talking about persons as a Trinitarian. But when we're trying to focus on the Son and Jesus, we can still bring in the identity of God, but it's relative. Relatively speaking, it's different from God the Father, but it doesn't have to focus on God the Father at the moment. So there's just a little bit of confusion on our part between social Trinitarianism and relative identity Trinitarianism. I don't need you to focus on that right now, and I'm probably not even defining those two terms at the best way possible, because I'm not really trying to focus on that right now. It's just part of my study. We'll look at that a little bit more as we work our way down through the study. This is just review. This is why I'm going through some of this rather quickly. But Dr. Branson favors an approach that I say he himself favors, and it's called Monarchical Trinitarianism, or MT. Now, the reason why this is important for us, especially in our review, is in the Greek, there is no Greek word that we would render into English as monotheism. Instead, it's monarchical or monarchian. And thus we get the word monarchical. Monoarche is made up of two Greek words, one arche. But in the church fathers, in the early days of the apostles of the apostles, and the first century, and the second century, and the third century, and following, the debates that took place between the Unitarian perspectives and the Trinitarian perspectives, they didn't use the term monotheism like we use it today. Instead, the terminology that you find, if I'm correct, if I remember, is the term monarchical. And thus, Dr. Beau Branson, who is a Trinitarian, is going to fall back to that terminology as well. Monarchical Trinitarianism is basically monotheistic Trinitarianism. He just uses the term that's preferred by the early church fathers. So that fancy term, monarchical. Don't get confused.